What's good, party people? This is According to Woods, and I have the honor and privilege of talking to the Cats of Renegade Wrestling Dojo. She's the one, the only Katzabella. Cat, what's going on?
Not much.
So, official cat of Renegade Wrestling Dojo. I mean, how did that come about? Because you're different, and for me, I like different in my wrestling, right? I've got kind of the weirdest kind of acclaim of wrestlers right now. Like obviously Aisha Raymond, my favorite, right? Zeta Zhang, my favorite, right? And I might be friends with those two gals, but also Jonathan Grisham, who's a person of African descent, right? And he's a catch wrestler, which I've never seen before. You've seen Billy Robinson, you've seen all these other catch wrestlers. Shayna Baszler is a woman's catch wrestler, and but I've never seen anything quite like Jonathan Grisham, right? And then also Danhausen. I love Danhausen, man, because he's just so different, and that's one of the reasons why I love you, because you're different. I've seen, obviously, like, WWE in its early incarnation try to do Battle Cat, and that only lasted one superstar taping. But you're bringing the cat back.
Yeah, it was a combination of quite a few people telling me different things about myself that they seen that got me thinking about the whole cat motif, how a cat's a lot quicker and more agile. And then it was actually Aisha that turned around and went, That's just you. You're a cat." And it just kind of stuck from there.
And what was your? I mean, obviously, she's the Big Femme Vader. She's Aisha Raymond, right? The Amazon, right? But Big Femme Vader now. And when she's telling you this, so you're like, oh, that's how you see me? Like, and was there any trepidation? You're like, no, I'm going to be something else. Was there something else in mind that you had, or you're like, no, no, that's totally me.
It wasn't really in the works, but it was. I was playing with the idea of like kind of a pagan witch kind of character, but it wasn't really working out, and that was just before everybody started telling me that I reminded them of a cat.
Wow. Wait, Pagan Witch. I kind of want to explore this, right? Again, different, obviously, NXT UK's got Isle of Dawn. There have been, in an incarnation, there it was never addressed. You could say that, Scarlet Bordeaux, with Killer Cross or Karrion Cross in her presentation, kind of witch right?
Yeah,
Um, but in terms of like what you're thinking, like what did you hope that incarnation of your character would become?
the pagan witch
Yeah.
one. It, she would. The main thing was she was gonna be like she was gonna be face, but not majorly face. She was gonna be mean at times, and she had this whole better than everybody else thing going on, but it wasn't really working out when we put it in play.
I dig it though. I mean, and this is one thing that I do. I mean, one of the many things that I love about professional wrestling, and nothing against like MMA and other combat sports, but like with MMA, you don't necessarily get to, you know, satisfy your creativity. Maybe you can with a strike or a particular submission, but in terms of what your character is and how you connect with your audience, you know, pro wrestling, man, that ticks all the boxes. And with that all being said, I mean, I kind of would like to have seen, even a promo of such, because it's like Pagan Witch, right? Like, oh man, you could get into all the religious aspects of whatever, and that's why the witchcraft is better than you, and you cast spells. Like, I, I'm I'm even working it out in my head, and it sounds fantastic. But obviously, coming into Katzabella, right? And Micmac. Our friend from the Eric Bischoff podcast says, "Hey, cat lady, hey,
Hi.
uh, yeah, he's over there in Australia, so we love McMac at According to Woods." But when you got this Katzabella, right? Did you already have the name in mind? I mean, it's it's a cool name to kind of roll off your tongue. You know, when you read it, it doesn't really stick, but then when you say it, you know, and I heard it from the amazing ring announcer at No Backup Required, Renegade Wrestling's own, right? And you can find it on the Renegade Dojo YouTube page. But it rolls right off your tongue. Is that like, how did you come up with the name?
It's actually a mixture of three different things. It's a mixture of my nana's middle name, my mum's like nickname, and the word cat just with a K.
No, that's good. And some of the to me, I think in terms of a name, right? Your When you combine certain aspects of what you love or who have influenced you on even a personal level, right? I mean, look at The Rock, right? His first incarnation that we got of him was Rocky Maivia. His dad's Rocky Johnson, his grandfather, the High Chief Peter Maivia, and you got Rocky Maivia, right? And you know that different levels of success with that, but you could imagine what that guy ended. I mean, look at what the guy ended up being, right? So, you know, overall, I think in the trajectory of his entire career, you know, Rocky Maivia definitely worked for what it was, right? A lot of people like to shit on it a little bit, but it's just like it was cool for what it was, right? You know, to kind of tipping the hat to the you know, to his lineage, but also, you know, getting away from it, it's how he developed his own voice, right? So as you're kind of going through it, right, you're like, oh, you're cat lady, then you've got Katzabella, you know, you're kind of like what is it? Uh Mega mixing your nanas, your mom and the word cat, right? So how do you start to develop like who this persona is and how you want it to be presented? Because I think it came off well, especially with your mystery tag team partner that ended up being a London Lovelace, right? That was amazing. um so I mean, how did you start to go like, this is how I want to be seen and this is how I want to be portrayed when it comes to um you know, my in-ring persona?
Really, it's still a work in process, but I knew that I wanted to be peppy, I wanted to be energetic, and kind of really portray that kind of cat aspect. Uh, but I've recently, with that last match against Aisha, when I was a lot too quick for her to put me into some of her moves, I kind of thought about it and quite like the kind of cheeky aspect of being a cat. Like they're peppy, they're sweet, but they can be a bit cheeky, and you can kind of see that in that last match where I was grinning whenever I got out the moves.
Yeah, and again, the footage of the entire show will be on the Renegade Wrestling Dojo YouTube page, which I can't wait to see. I had the honor of calling the match over at No Backup Required, which is one of the great joys of my life, and to see all of you, you know, all of you performers, essentially, you know, become into yourselves, right? Especially after the pandemic and what have you. The crazy thing though, you mentioned, you know, your last match at Renegade with Big Fan Vader, who's become a trainer. She is your trainer, right?
Yeah,
You know, obviously Mae Young Classic alumnus, the first tournament alumnus, uh, growing on to be a legend in Japan. That she's right on that path, right? Um, and then you're like, you look at the booking sheet and you're like, I gotta I gotta face my trainer, you know, and she's eons bigger than me. And how am I going to figure it out? And I like that your mind was like, okay, well, cheeky cat, right? Because usually when you're trying to nab a neighborhood cat or what have you, it doesn't always work out. You might get a hiss, you might get whatever. I even have a instance where um, we had a feral cat, right? And I was going to the shower, so I can go to work, right? This cat ends up walking between my legs where I trip, and then he basically does a backflip off the back wall and then goes in the way in the other direction like nothing ever happened, right? And again, I'm hundreds of pounds bigger than this cat, but that cat figured out a way to get me off my game plan, right? So
Yep.
with that all being said, was that what you were kind of going for?
The whole time it was really just going through my head, just don't let her catch you, don't let her catch you, don't let her catch you. That was the entire thing. I'm just in my head, and it worked out in the end. But I did have a little help from uh, my debuting House of Loveless sister,
Hmm.
uh, Jade Black. She's new to she. She's just debuted as my manager recently in that last uh, show, but she will be wrestling soon.
Yeah, and again, across two shows, right? You become, I wouldn't say an unknown, right? But definitely not a household name, right? And then you know you have London, right, where they're like, there was a strong contingent at no backup required for London Loveless, as well as for you. You could say that it was 50-50 split between your fans and her fans, right? Or their fans. And with that all being said, you end up forming the House of Loveless, right?
Yep.
And then having a manager accompanying you. That's quite a character transformation in just two shows. Which how's that ride been for you?
It's been quite it's been quite the ride, but Jade mainly came out with me because she is still quite nervous about things. So it was getting her used to being out in front of people. Uh, Plus, she helped me in the end.
Well, that's amazing. That's amazing. And regardless of how young you are in the business, theoretically, you just the fact that you've stepped in between the ropes, you've worked the show, you've taken the bumps, all of that, you're still the veteran to somebody else, which I think is amazing, and you've carried it pretty well, right? Now, I guess to kind of circle back, right? Because we've talked about your current day status and who you are as of right now, but how does a young Katzabella find pro wrestling?
It didn't actually find me till my current partner. Like previous friends has tried to get me into wrestling, and it's just never worked. It didn't stick with me until I started going out with my partner at the minute. And the first show he took me to was a Source Govan show. And that was when I started thinking, oh, this is interesting. And further down the line, I got even more interested when I started taking pictures for the wrestling.
Wow. So right from the jump, right? Because I was a fan, you know, for I mean, since my youth, right? And it wasn't until I was an adult that I go to my first wrestling show. But right off the bat, you get taken, and shout out to your partner for kind of like, oh, no, no, no. The TV stuff, whatever. Let's go to a Source show. And you could have gone to, a better show. Shout out to Source Wrestling. But, you end up going to a live show and being in the crowd and seeing, from still on the outsider point of view, but also you're amongst people who absolutely love it, and assuming, you did it pre-pandemic, right?
Yeah,
So people are like, whatever, drinking, vaping, whatever, but it's a different it's a different vibe than if you had just watched it at home, right? So,
Yeah.
um, and then you said you ended up doing photography. How did that come about?
See, before I started going out with my partner, I was doing photography at college, and uh, this is about 4 years ago. But after that first source show, we ended up going to a Reckless show. He was going to help out, and I was just going to watch. But before that, we had ended up going into town to do a photo shoot for my college class. And as we got to the show, they were going on about not having a photographer, and I ended up taking the pictures for them.
Well, that's amazing, right? Because again, you're seeing all of these performers, right? And they're deeply entrenched in their art, and you get to take your art and your skill set and apply it to this world, right? And see it from a perspective that many don't get to do right off the bat, and and it kind of might have given birth to like the spontaneity of wrestling, right? Where like
Yep.
somebody pulls out, the person who drives the ring truck, whatever, and you're driving the ring truck. I think that was Molly Spartan's type of deal, right? And then just a litany of things, and you could be like, oh, I'm working the opening match, and so somebody doesn't show up, and you're in the main event, right? That's the spontaneity of it. So this not being able to have a photographer at the show ended up working a lot better for you in terms of your optics. I would imagine so. And then you're kind of like, the cat like senses kind of start to prong up. Your cat ears start to prong up, so to speak, and you're like, hey, this might be a cool thing. I mean, my partner's already doing it. He seems to like it. I like what it brings out of him. So let me give it a go.
That was actually along the lines of my thinking. Like with the source show, it got me interested in watching it, and through taking the pictures several times, getting closer to the ring, seeing the different atmosphere from a different perspective really brought more interest into it to actually do it. And it was actually Aisha that finally convinced me to like start, because she had just started doing the uh being a trainer for it. So it was a big step in trying out.
Well, I mean, it's kind of cool, right? That this is all, a lot of people talk about, overnight success and insta famous and what have you, but this is where like all of the moving pieces kind of work together in your good to welcome you to the ring, right? Your partner's already training and helping out, right? You have the skill set of photography, right? You go to a live show versus watching it just on TV where you can grab a popcorn or you could go to the loo or what have you, right? But you're totally immersed in it, right? And then you kind of become under the auspices of Aisha Raymond. Like
Yep.
you could have a better entry to it, and especially like seeing all the effects. A lot of people like, I want to be a wrestler. I'm one of those too. Like I want to be a wrestler, and then I hear a bump and I'm like, I don't want to do that anymore, right? But you had seen, him go through the motions and the ice pack and the Epsom salt and everything, and you're like, but he still loves it. Like he's getting thrashed, but he still loves it. There might be
Yep.
something in here for me.
Yeah. Uh, I didn't actually think I'd get this far, to be honest. I mainly started out, it was along the lines of it's an exercise. It's something that will keep me fit. And then I realized I was actually good at it. And then that's when my mindset changed to actually being able to continue on.
And it's wild, right? Because you're going in it like, oh, the exercise, the drills, right? Those are things that'll help me out in terms of just maintaining a good body, right? Like, just health and wealth and what have you. A lot of people get into like jujitsu or kickboxing and what have you, just to end up bettering themselves, bettering their physical condition, and then they're like, oh, the trainer says, oh, you have a fight. In your case, you have a match. Your let's take bumps, and it's becoming more, right? And I think it's absolutely fun because, again, this isn't the path. Like photography and wrestling, unless you're like what, Paul Heyman and Jim Cornette, those don't usually mix, right? But you having this partner and you guys are, becoming a little bit more serious. I mean, my wife, I'm like taking her to wrestling shows. It can be a bit much, right? Because she's like, oh, this might not be my scene, what have you, right? But you're coming along with them, and you're kind of seeing the passion that he has, right? The passion of the folks around him, and it's just like, I want some of that. What is that? What is that magic dust? And let's see what I can do with it.
Yep.
So, what was that first day of training like? Right, because I would think it would be like light years different than a college photography class, right?
It didn't end well.
Oh, really?
uh, we were going through bumps and stuff at first because it was private lessons that I started out on, just to get used to like the different little things first before I went to the group class. And I think I took three front bumps and had to go. It didn't end well in my stomach.
Oh, that's rough. That's but that's what happens, and
Yep.
that's why my utmost respect. Even if you're not the greatest of worker, right? The fact that you've done it, and even running the ropes, like we saw Enzo Amore. That's when I've been watching wrestling for 20 years at least up until that point, right? And when he gets shot into the rope and nearly gets decapitated, I'm all like, whoa. And then I remembered back to like there was like an MTV True Life, I want to be a wrestler. And there's a way that you have to approach the rope. You almost have to lean in, otherwise you'll get bit. And I put the two and two together and I was like, but it looks like, every match is centered around, somebody running the ropes or an Irish whip or what have you. So you take it for granted. But like literally the physical attacks that it takes on your body, like you said, two front bumps. That's it. Like I might lose my lungs here, you know. But you came back. You came
Yeah.
back.
Uh, it was like the middle of the lesson after the front bumps, and we just moved on to like grappling and stuff a wee bit to finish off.
Now, how did you take to grappling? Because I love, in terms of all of combat sports, right? I think that would be my favorite discipline because you can see somebody who is outweighed by 20, 40, 80, 100 plus pounds, right? Just lay waste to somebody that again is outweighs them by a considerable amount that might be taller, right? And for me, I feel like every gal for sure, but everyone should be take some sort of grappling course, right? But females specifically, because again, living in the world without, I mean, with men, like we can. It can be a scary place, right? But if you can tie somebody up, right, and get pushed to the ground or whatever, and you lock somebody up in a submission, that is possible versus if you're a boxer or a Muay Thai fighter or a karate fighter. And nothing against those disciplines, but if you get pushed to the ground, That's about it. Your whole arsenal goes right out the window, right? So,
Yep.
your first grappling class, right? Were you the most undersized person there?
Yeah, I'm only 4'11", so I am the smallest person in the class, completely. Uh, but it is a struggle sometimes. It just, with a lot of practice, you get a lot better at things. And it took quite a lot of practice for me to do stuff to the bigger people.
Yeah, and again, going with the understanding, like you wanted to go and get better, right, in terms of your conditioning and what have you. I think that's a good way of understanding your body's biomechanics, right? To
Yep.
hey, here's somebody who's bigger. I mean, everybody's bigger in this particular instance. Everybody's bigger than me. How am I going to use my body to kind of thwart them? That's why I dug, like, especially when it comes to, like, pro wrestling, like AJ Lee. AJ Lee was often undersized. Spike Dudley, to another extent, was vastly undersized, but figured out a way to essentially get their entire body to wrap around their foe, that they would ensure themselves a victory, or at least a path to victory, where it wouldn't be so mismatched. On paper it looked mismatched, but it's not. Heck, another one of my favorite wrestlers today, I don't know, have you seen Microman?
I don't think so.
He's a luchador, and he's maybe about 2 feet tall. He's tiny. I mean, I guess in English it would be Microman, but in Spanish it's Microman. But he's yay big. Like, out of the dwarf wrestlers and what have you, he is probably the smallest that I'd ever seen. And I found out, well, his dad is actually, I don't know if you've seen the clip, but there's like a clip of a CMLL um uh, uh match, and there's like this little, like, monkey, like a dwarf person in a monkey suit, and then somebody gets shot off the rope, and that wrestler that gets shot off the rope basically runs into this monkey person, right, and makes him do a front bump, almost like a 360 flip into the first rope, right. Well, that is Microman's father, right. So a dwarf luchador, one of the smallest, right, giving birth to another one, and this Microman, man, you got to see it. I'm gonna send you clips, but in those instances, right, they're able to use their entire body to kind of thwart foes that are considerably bigger on paper, right? So in that grappling class, like, how much did it help you figure out your body, and what you could versus what you couldn't do, when it came to grappling?
It was a lot, because I'm the smallest, it was a lot of getting used to the different proportions of everybody else, as well as what I'm limited to. So it helps a lot to have like a bigger class. That way you're not just doing it for the one size. And our our full class is, it's not huge, but it's big enough to have a variety.
Yeah, no, and variety is the spice of life, as they say, right? Um, so how, like, when after you start training, right, are you starting to maybe watch things, watch particular wrestlers and see how they do, or were you just kind of focused on training?
It's a mix of both. If my partner's watching it, I'll watch along, kind of thing. I'll I'll go out of my way if there's like a move that I've thought of, that I'm looking to see if anybody else has done it and see how they've done it, kind of thing. Or uh, I watch WrestleMania with them and stuff like that as well. So there's that, but quite a lot of it is I'm focused on training.
Yeah, no, 100%. And Patrick Levine says, "Cool." Shout out to you, Patrick. Now, what who are some of the wrestlers that you might have watched, right, to kind of get a little bit of inspiration by? Obviously, you have your partner, so you're watching, all of his ins and outs about the pro wrestling business. But who else were you watching around this time in your infancy, in your pro wrestling career?
Mainly people that are roughly about the same height as me. So Alexa Bliss was one that I frequently watched from all of her old stuff as well as quite a lot of her new stuff. Uh, uh apart from that, it was mainly just that was the only one I really focused on. Apart from that, it was just like other shows or watching with him.
Yeah, I love that you mentioned Alexa Bliss because I mean, of course, she's getting a lot of flack for, yeah, and it's nothing of her doing, right? The boss tells you one thing, hey, you're going to be paired with the Fiend, right? And you're going to do the storyline and what have you. And the pandemic hits, right? And you essentially, he gets fired, right? He gets fired, and a lot of the blowback goes on you because you're the only one there. Especially the fact that Wyndham Rotunda, the man behind the Fiend character and behind Bray Wyatt, he's hasn't booked a date since his initial release, right? So she's getting all of the brunts of the hatred for the people that love the Fiend and wondered why Vince and the crew, let him go, right? So, but a lot of people forget how talented this she is, right? I mean, she's a fitness performer, like bodybuilder such cheerleader, right? And to me, cheerleading, especially when you get into the injuries, cheerleading to me is as much of a sport than anything else, right?
Yep.
Um, so she has this athletic background, right? In her NXT run early on, I think she worked a couple of matches with a young pre FTR, pre revival Scott Dawson. I can't remember what his Cash Wheeler and something or other are their names now, right? But they were actually doing like a redneck gimmick, right? And she was like the redneck girlfriend of this whatever, right? And then she gets paired up with Murphy, and I forget his tag team partner, but they lead to a tag team NXT tag team championship run with her as the manager. But her Sparkle Splash, right? Alexa Bliss's Sparkle Splash is one of the most impressive visual moves and athletic moves that I've ever seen in pro wrestling. Like, how she starts up perched on the top rope and then she rotates herself almost like a pizza, like people who are flinging the pizza dough, like, and just goes right the opposite way in midair. It's the damnedest thing I've ever seen. One of the damnedest things I've ever seen. So that's a great, great inspiration to have.
Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, Ashley Rose Nova, the good sister there, saying, "Hey, what's going on, Ash? Hope you're well." And folks, go ahead and check her out on all of her social medias as well as the Twitch streams because I mean, she even before I was doing the pro wrestling, Ashley Rose Nova was covering pro wrestling, and she's a hell of a Twitch streamer. That's a good sister right there. Um, Now talk to me about your when you knew you were going to have your first match. What was how long had you been training, and what was your initial reaction?
If the amount of time that I've been training, if you were to take away the the part of the year that was on lockdown and you weren't allowed to do anything and added up the little bits, probably roughly a year and a bit maybe. But that's mainly due to like the the lockdowns and stopping and starting. But I just started training just before the first lockdown. Uh, So it hasn't been that long, really. If if you were to take away all the different bits where we've had to stay inside, but no, the first time we found out about the show and putting it together and everything, it was it was quite intimidating for everybody because it was first show for everybody apart from one person or other, I think, roughly. So it was the first time being in front of a crowd for most of us. Uh, and I think once we had all kind of like thought about it and started helping each other with uh, the nerves and stuff, and we had got together the the show, and then the split happened from Fierce Females, and then we had actually all ended up in a Starbucks to talk about what was going to happen. But once the show started, and there was no really any nerves after that. It was all just kind of you've got this, just go
Wow.
out there.
Yeah, absolutely. And my goodness, what a way to put Starbucks over, because the brilliancy of Renegade Wrestling Dojo, right? And it's now two shows, right? Um, there's brilliance. I mean, and the talent that I've seen on the card, so promising, so promising. And when you think about it, right? Because you mentioned it, pandemic happened, right? And a lot of you guys and gals, um, you had just started within the pandemic or right before the pandemic or right before the first lockdown. And it was just like, when you start training, right, you have stars in your eyes, so to speak, right, because it, it's something to get you through the bumps that you're taking today, the meals that you're or whatever, right? You're like, but one day I'm going to be able to make it out. One day I'm going to be able to debut. One day, I'm going to be booked on this promotion, that promotion, and what have you, right? All of these things, right? Because it helps you get through the treacherous times of what you're going through at the time during training, right? But how did the lockdown, sit well with you, and especially, like, how did you keep yourself positive and busy throughout that time, because it hit a lot of people really bad, and it's still reverberating to this day. But how did it affect you, and how you saw yourself in pro wrestling?
To It's awkward to think about because it was so long now. It practically a year and a half now since the first lockdown, roughly. But if I remember rightly, most of it we spent going on that daily walk you were allowed, uh, maybe doing a little bit of hold for holds in the flat with my partner, and it was just a daily. We'd always check up on each other on the group chat for Renegade and things like that, just to keep each other up.
And I think it's brilliant. I really do, because the fact that you had a partner, like, you guys can go through drills. You can basically go and pick his brain for what he'd known, because he'd already been in the business, and go, this is what we're doing.
Yep.
Now, how did it? How was that time for him? Did you see him, kind of go through the motions? I mean, this is a time where you guys can feed off of each other, right? But obviously, it had to hit him hard, because he had been, doing it for a couple of years up until that point, right? And looking forward to live shows being back. You're in it, right? That's a new vigor that he has behind him, right? Not just his own love, but he has you training. He has you as a partner. Like, there's a lot going for him, and then it all gets taken away unceremoniously. Like, what was watching him go through it like?
It was awful. He was not taking it very well. He was wanting to train all the time. Uh, he had it's weird to say this, but I debuted before him. But with the lockdown and that, he got really upset because of it was taking longer for classes to go back, for him to train and all that, and he had been putting weight on to get up a level because he wasn't weighing enough for his own mental health kind of thing, and he had got up to roughly about what he wanted, but and during the lockdown he actually caught COVID, uh, and it made him lose all the weight.
Wow, that I mean, I ended up getting it pretty bad around mid August, 2021, and I mean, I thought I was gonna die. There was several occasions where I was just like, nope, that's it. If I close my eyes and it's a wrap, I have to be satisfied. Yes, there's more to be done, my family to be raised and everything like that. But I mean, if it's it, my body is literally shutting down. That's a wrap, And it kind of made it a little bit sweeter when he eventually does make his debut. Literally going through the gamut of what you can, the emotional part of it is just wild to me, right? Like, you're in wrestling, you're doing your thing. A lot, you have a partner who's not into wrestling at first, ends up becoming it. I mean, liking it. One, open enough to go to a show, and then now photography. So now we're both working behind the scenes, and then now she starts training, what have you, like, and then of course, like, he's supportive, but then it's just like, wow, she started after me, and she's having her first match, right? And seeing him go through it, right? And he's seeing you go through it too, and really building a foundation. Of course, like I said, like, it hit a lot of people really hard, right? And it reverberates to this day, but the if you developed a sort of relationship, right? It either, you know, sanctified it even more or solidified it if it was already if your relationship was already there, right? So you're getting to feed off of each other. But having that first match, right, makes it all that much sweeter because all of the craziness that was going on in the world or whatever, you have your gem. You have your gem, right? Because coal without pressure, is just a lump of coal, right? But you got this diamond in your match, something that you both were working so hard towards, and then it happens, and I think it was a really good experience that a lot of the folks on the card were in a similar scenario, right? And similar level of experience, right? Where
Yep.
you didn't have to go it alone. Oftentimes, and it's all about perception, but most people will say, like, I was the rookie with all of these veterans, people that have been to the bigger shows and what have you, and now I'm just this tepid little person or whatever, and I'm not saying that's male female. That's, you could be 6'8" and green as grass and you'll still have that, weirdness about you, right? And I think it was really beautiful that you get to, you get to kind of expand yourself for the first time in front of a loving audience, and an audience that was jam packed at the Source Wrestling School, which is, for a
Yep.
first show, that's amazing, right? And then the only veterans that were on the card, well, other than the Future Shock Tom Fulton, shout out to the Future Shock, got the best gear in the business, but the two veterans, Regina Rosendahl and Aisha Raymond, they're working towards the top, right? Aisha works a match with another fierce alumnus, and then Regina and Brody Adler, they battle it out in a battle of the behemoths, right? So it's a lot less pressure that everybody is kind of on the same plane and what have you. Is that, and that's just me kind of outside looking in. Well, is that how you felt?
Yeah, it wasn't the first time I had met Tom, so it, it was a fun experience to be on the same show as him. I've taken pictures of his matches before, and it was really a different perspective. Uh, Regina, that was my first time meeting Regina. I believe, I think so. Uh, but she's absolutely lovely, and it was just such a an honor to be basically in the same room as her.
Yeah, and it's wild too. And I think, and they just had a match, Aisha Raymond and Regina Rosendahl. But it's wild. And Regina is a friend of the show, as is Big Fan Vader. We do a weekly show. Her Big Fan Vader and I. But it's kind of cool because Regina is almost the Aisha Raymond of FCF over in her homeland, right? And you have two veterans, like legit veterans, right? In Regina and Aisha. Then you've got the future shock Tom Fulton. And if you guys have questions about matches or what have you, you have three veterans that literally have a world of advice between the three of
Yep.
them, plus the folks there at Source, right? And it's just like this great nurturing environment, and you don't necessarily get that in wrestling. I mean, when you think about like Hulk Hogan and Hulk Hogan, but the first time that he goes into the snake pit in Tampa, Florida, Hiro Matsudo breaks his leg,
Mhm.
right? That is totally different from what the experience that you had, and I think that's cool. Now, talk to me about the House of Loveless, right? Obviously, you in London end up tagging on the first show. They end up being your tag team partner, your mystery tag team partner after the aforementioned match with Future Shock Tom Fulton. But when do you figure out, like, hey, we've got chemistry here, right? Like, we should really make a go of being a tag team. When does that come about?
Well, really, we're not a tag team. We're a faction. The House of Lovelust is a faction within Renegades. We have three people now, with with London as our figurehead, and it was just after the show and realised we could be great together, but we also want to go our individual ways. Uh, and Jade, the new girl that came out as my manager, she is our little darling gem, with just recently joined us in the faction, which is probably why she got kidnapped by the Struggle Sisters.
Ooh.
If you've seen that video.
Yeah, man. And talk about, a duo that is just wreaking havoc, right? And it's wild because just this week the Steiner brothers are the final inductees to the WWE Hall of Fame class of 2022, right? And the Strother sisters, Maven and Raven, man, just in terms of the aura, they remind me of a young Rick and Scott Steiner back in the day. Just the fear that it would impose, maybe even like the Doctor Death, Steve Williams, and Bam Bam Terry Gordy, the Miracle Violence collection. Um, Jesus Christ, man, the Struthers. Uh, First off, I mean, how do you combat those two? Because they are a scary duo. I've seen the pictures. I've commentated the first card. They are wild and reckless. They fit into like 1970s wrestling where they would just run roughshod. Like the fans would try to slash their tires or throw battery acid or stab them. They're that old school heel. They're whoa, whoa, man. They give me shivers down my damn spine. Right. So
Yeah.
knowing that that's going about, like, how do you and the house decide, like, hey, we might tangle with these people because they're on the roster, they're making the same towns as us, they're on the same cards, but we need to make an impact on them. They're the big dogs in the yard.
Really, with the Struffer sisters, there is no simple way to get them down. What we decided to try and do was tire them out first before attacking them. But with their whole persona, they really really get the crowd, but like they get booed, they get some people even cheer for them because they like it, and it's just a whole atmosphere when they come out.
Yeah, it's a shrill. Like it's a it almost reminds me of the Undertaker, right? You could add the Ultimate Warrior beforehand, or Macho Man Randy Savage, and this big presentation, the Heart Foundation, or whatever. But when the gong hits and the fucking lights go out, the mood fucking changes. My goodness, right? And that's the aura that the Strother sisters emote. That's what they get. I look at them. I was scared. Like, you can go back and watch the no backup required footage. I'm doing commentary. I have a tremble in my voice because of the sheer, like, enormity of and destruction that the fucking Struthers uh definitely put out. Like, and I could only imagine what it must be to be in the ring with them, right? And that's a hell of a strategy, right? Like, I'm gonna tire him
Yep,
out, right? Maybe I'll chop the legs, right? Like, because I gotta take him down. Because otherwise, good fucking luck. That's it.
yep,
Like, it might be it for me. Even if they take a tumble, and I'm there. A la King Kong Bundy WrestleMania 3 with, like, one of the dwarf wrestlers, right? Like, it could have been over. It could have been over, right? And again, the Strother sisters are just scary, man. But
yep,
kudos to you, so early on in your career that you're facing off with these two behemoths, right? That's what they are. They're mean. They're nasty. They're like the fucking nasty boys. Like that. They remind me of so many great tag teams, right? But you and London, right? Willing to just, like, hey, fuck it. They're big. They're scary. But I want that win. I want to be able to go to the pay window, right? With a victory purse versus then somebody that has the participation. Hey, thanks for coming, because that's not going to cover gas, right? That's not going to cover the petrol. I need a win, right? So, kudos to you in London for so early in your respective careers going toe to toe with the Struthers.
yep. That plan was really all about tire them out, separate them because together they will destroy, but separate we might be able to take them.
Yeah, no, 100%. Divide and conquer, right? That's a very great, war strategy that has permeated, through the pantheons of war, right? And it is an art of war, right? Because if the Struthers get a hold of you at full force, it could be the end. Not just the end of the wrestling career, but end of the life. They're that vicious. My goodness. Like, and again, as you could say, I am speaking very highly of him. Not to dissuade you in London, because I think the world of you two as well. But I'm literally half the world away, and I think
Yep,
that if the on the video waves that the Struthers hear that me besmirching them in any way, or them perceiving me besmirching them, I might shut off the lights, and then the Strother sisters will be at my damn doorstep, ready to beat the shit out of me. So I'm scared of them. And again, that much more of the respect for you in London and the House of Loveless, because you guys are like, you know what? I see you, and I think I could win.
Yeah.
Now I noticed, because in many ways, right? You're a long way from the photography student in college. You might still be doing that, right? But wrestling has definitely made its mark on you, because when you went like that, I saw, I think I saw a tattoo of a turnbuckle. So, what significance does that have on you?
Uh, it was my partner after he debuted. I wanted to get the turnbuckle tattoo as a sign of debuting. It's oop, there.
Yeah,
It's the it's what holds the rope onto the posts.
yeah, it's a
So
turnbuckle. Yeah,
yep, it's basically just a sign of debuting. And if a wrestler sees a normal person that they know hasn't wrestled a day in their life, they will walk away from them.
I like it. I like it. But the symbolism, I just think it's amazing that you were able to immortalize, his years of training culminating in that one first match, and being able to, that's with you forever.
Yep.
So, yeah, that's amazing. I just absolutely love it. Um, Now, before we go, um, do you have any dream matches that you want to, as you're starting to establish yourself in your own wrestling career? Is there any call outs that you have, or uh, people that you think you might match up well with?
I don't really, I'm not really one for thinking about this, to be honest, right now. With, I'm still, even though I've debuted, I'm still learning quite a lot. Uh, but I've actually had one of my dream matches. That was with Aisha. Uh, that was one of my bucket lists to have a match with Aisha, and it happened in the last show.
That's not bad, right? To have, and again, the wealth of experience that she's had. Again, alumnus of the first WWE Mae Young Classic. A, I mean, especially as you guys were coming out of lockdown, literally the belt collector, right? Like, as Kenny Omega was losing his titles, Aisha was gaining them just all over the world. So that's pretty cool that you get to check that off of your bucket list so early in your career, and I think that's amazing. And I think that's a nice little test that Aisha put in front of you, and like, I'm going to do it. I'm going to be your administrator, and you're going to have to deal with it. Like the Struthers, that's one, but I'm the one you need to worry about. I absolutely love it. Let's That's why she's just so brilliant in terms of her mind for wrestling, and why she's so sought after the world over. So that's amazing. That's amazing. But speaking of amazing, there has been a lot of people, both professionally and personally, that have basically given birth to the shining star that is Katzabella, right? So take as long as you need. Let's get some shout outs out of the way.
Well, Aisha's been really the big kind of starting point. Uh, I'll another shout out. I'll do for a partner. Uh, you know him. Obviously, you've done a interview with him recently. Leo McLean. Uh, I don't really have anybody else to shout out.
What about the family? Which I gotta. That was one thing I wanted to ask you. What was your, like? You're going to university, right? And you have that career set, and then you're like, I'm gonna wrestle too, right? What was their reaction?
At first, my mum didn't really like it, but after I showed her, I think it was some of the videos we took of the private class, uh, where it was just me and my partner, and we were just doing different moves and stuff. And I think she enjoyed me seeing me beat him up. But I don't even know if mom's gonna see this, to be honest.
It'll be our little secret. Yeah, and you guys in the According to Woods chats, let's not let Katzabella's mom know. I'm just saying. Um, no, that's amazing. Now, obviously, there are people that are going to see this and they want a little bit more of Katzabella and want to connect with you on the socials. So, where can they do that?
uh, well, on Facebook, um, I'm really bad at posting, but I have a Facebook page that's just says Katzabella, and uh, it is the same picture as the one that was on for this. On Twitter, you can find me at a second at Cat's a wrestler.
Mm-hmm.
So it's just the first bit of my name and then wrestler after it. Um, I think that's all I've got.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I did link your Twitter right below. So it's there. You don't have to look for far to find a little bit more of Katzabella. Well, Kat, I thank you so much for doing this. This has been such a joy, such a joy. And again, not just me, right? If you want a little bit more of Katzabella, Scottish Wrestling Network, they've also got an amazing, amazing interview and podcast with her, which you definitely got to check out. Shout out to Scottish Wrestling Network. Just love everything that they're doing. I love the Scottish scene, love the UK scene. So again, it's such an honor to have you here, and such an honor to have you guys here at According to Woods. And thank you guys for being here, for doing this, for the support. And if you haven't already done so, go ahead and like, share, and subscribe to the According to Woods podcast on Facebook, YouTube, Twitch, and Twitter. I mean, Kat Sabella, you're subscribed to the podcast, aren't you?
Yep, I'm subscribed. It's quite fun to watch all the different interviews.
Oh, thank you. No, I appreciate it. So be like Katsabella and go ahead and subscribe to the YouTube and Facebook and all of the other channels. But if you don't believe me, you don't believe Kat, and I don't know why you wouldn't. Well, here's a contemporary of Aisha Raymond, Mae Young Classic alumnus herself. Here's Zeta Zhang to help convince you.
Hey, this is Zeta Zhang. Make sure you subscribe to According to Woods YouTube.